Good afternoon, Dr. Huang. For my book exploration project and presentation, I decided to focus on the John Newbery Medal Award books. The John Newbery Medal winners are always very special books to me. I actually went back and looked, and I have read over half of all of the Newbery Medal winners going back to the late 1970s. And of those books, some of them, well, a lot of them, I'd say probably about 10 to 12 of them are favorites that I have reread several times over. One of my all-time favorite books, Elijah Buxton, is a Newbery Medal winner. I did not do this book for this presentation because I have done some other projects with that book, but I'm currently reading it for the 57th, 58th, and 59th times with my sixth graders this year. That's how many times I've read that book and how much I absolutely love it. I find that Newbery Medal books are some of the best children's literature out there. And saying children's literature, also young adult literature, since I deal with YA in my own classroom. The books that I selected for this presentation were really well thought out on my part. And I think once I get into that, you'll understand why I selected them and not some of the other books that I have recently read. I read The War That Saved My Life. It's absolutely fantastic. I will definitely be reading it again. And I also read Echo just a couple of months ago. And all those were amazing books. I chose three for very special reasons, and so we'll get into that. This medal was named after John Newbery, who was an 18th century English bookseller. Although this award really centered on focusing on what librarians deem to be distinguished literature, it's really opened up over the years, and now really any American children's or YA book can be nominated and then judged. And I do want to point out some of the criteria that is used. I feel like this is very important to note because these are things that I recognized as my book selections having. Of course, the interpretation of theme or concept is very important. I feel like all three of the books that I selected have very strong themes. Presentation of information to organization in a relatable way, in an easy to read way for young readers. The development of plot, of course, is extremely important. All three books that I selected for this presentation, I feel meet that criteria. Definitely the creation and use of characterization in the book is extremely important. Again, very strong characters and protagonists in all three of the books that I selected. And then, of course, the setting. Setting is extremely important in one of the books that I selected, and style and how appropriate it is for young readers or children readers. So let's just go ahead and talk about some of the books that I picked. So the first book that I selected is El Deafo by C.C. Bell. El Deafo is very unique in that it is a semi-autobiography. It is loosely based on C.C. Bell, the author's actual life. At a very young age, C.C. Bell became sick, and due to that illness, became deaf. At that time, hearing aids were actually like a backpack type apparatus that would strap to the front of the body, and then wires would come out of it and then could be placed into the ear. It's actually a picture of young C.C. Bell, the author, in the back of the book, and she's actually has this apparatus underneath her overalls to kind of hide it a little bit, but you can see that she does have the wires going to her ear. She's absolutely precious here. And this is about the age that the character Cece in the book is designed, and there is young Cece portrayed as a rabbit and as a superhero El Deafo. So the thing about this book that I absolutely love, besides the fact that it has such a heartwarming story, is that it is a graphic novel. As someone who really loves graphic novels and sees that graphic novels are a way to reach reluctant readers, this book just really caught my attention and drew me in. This is actually my third copy. I have several copies of this book. Two of them are checked out at the moment. They're always checked out and rarely sit on the shelf for very long. Students are drawn to this because it is illustrated and it looks to them to be very easy to read. However, there's actually a very intense story behind these adorable pictures of bunnies and these simple words. In the book, Cece talks about how her deafness now isolates her from her peers. And so when she thinks she has a chance to get a fresh start, what really happens is that she goes through a series of shallow friendships. She finds the friend who mistreats her and bosses her around and acts as if she is better than her. Something that a lot of middle school and upper elementary age children can relate to. She finally finds another friend who is almost too sympathetic of Cece's deafness and starts to treat her abnormally or as if she is too different. And of course, that's not what Cece wants at all. She just wants to fit in, and she's a normal child who just has one tiny difference, but it doesn't hold her back or change who she is personality-wise. At last, she finds a true friend who loves her for who she is, doesn't treat her any differently because of her disability. And really, that's what we want young readers to kind of latch onto, is the idea that someone out there can accept you and will accept you for who you are, no matter what. And if they don't, then they're not a true friend. So there are a lot of themes in here that I think young readers need to have exposure to. And of course, the character of Cece, after she realizes that with her supersonic hearing aid, she can hear things that the other students can't, she uses that ability to try to gain some friendships. And initially it works and she becomes very popular, but again, it only results in these shallow friendships. And if you can't be who you truly are, then it's not worth your time or your effort. Cece begins to think of herself as a superhero El Defo when she is able to hear things beyond the norm of her classmates. So we have this superhero alter ego going on that I think that a lot of young people tend to have. We have that person inside that we summon when we need some courage or some strength, or we need help dealing with something, or in our heads we run through how we would approach something if we were someone else. Well, even adults do that at times. But this is very relatable and it's understandable. And I think the graphic novel format is absolutely brilliant for an autobiographical work. If you ask students to read an autobiography, they will be scared. They will not want to do it. And to them, it's going to be dry and unentertaining. But in this format, it is captivating and totally engaging. And that's why I chose this book. It's absolutely fantastic. The artwork is great. Everything about it is wonderful. The next book that I selected is also one that students might not normally gravitate towards. And I have the Scholastic version, so it doesn't actually have the medal on there. But this is one of the Newbery Award winners. And it is called One Came Home by Amy Timberlake. And underneath these words, when I first read them, I knew I wanted to read the book. It said, "A sister lost, a body found, the truth buried." Very cleverly written. This is actually historical fiction. Historical fiction is not something that young readers normally gravitate towards. Kind of like with the autobiography, it's scary to them and they expect it to be dry, and they also expect to have some difficulty really comprehending it because they may have a lack of background knowledge. This, though, really provides woven into the story are all of these historical details that really help the kid or reader understand and visualize the plot and the setting and the characters and how they look and how they dress and why they act the way that they do. The setting of this is Placid, Wisconsin in the late 1800s, and the main character or protagonist is Georgie. Georgie I loved right from the start because she is spunky and feisty, and although she's a girl and supposed to be wearing a dress and thinking about getting married and starting a family and being a housewife, instead Georgie is busy practicing her rifle skills, and she's one of the best sharpshooters in the area. So she really doesn't fit that stereotypical norm of a woman back then, and what sometimes women are even seen as today in the 2000s. Georgie's wonderful personality just really comes to life with Amy Timberlake's words and imagery. Now, for Georgie, she has a falling out with her sister Agatha, and Agatha takes off. Several months later, actually, I want to say 7 months later, a body is returned to Lake Placid, and in that wooden coffin is the decomposed body of someone wearing a dress that is easily recognizable as Georgie's sister Agatha's. Now, everyone in town comes to the realization that Agatha is dead and gone forever, except Georgie has this instinctual feeling that it is not her sister that is in the coffin and then being buried. While everyone else is mourning the loss of Agatha, Georgie starts to plan on how she is going to go out on her own as a young girl with a rifle, a horse that she manages to borrow, and she sets off to find out who knows something about her sister's true whereabouts, if her sister is actually in any kind of danger at all, and then to retrieve her sister and bring her back. Her escapades lead her into all kinds of trouble with pigeoners, large groups of people who are going from place to place to kill pigeons. There's actually a market for this at this time. This is also really close to the time that there was the Great Chicago Fire, and there's like actually an allusion to that in the story, which was very, very interesting. But without giving too much of the book away, Georgie's travels put her through all kinds of intense situations that you would never expect a young girl to have to go through. And fortunately, her sharpshooting skills come into play as well. The reason why I definitely feel this book earned its honor is the wonderful way that Amy Timberlake brings Georgie to life in the setting. Again, it's historical fiction that can be very complicated, but everything is described so well and so accurately that it really enables someone who does like that background knowledge to really come to understand that time period in women's rights and what was expected of a young girl. For readers, I found that both male and female readers will gravitate towards this book and enjoy the book despite the protagonist being a female. She's relatable in some ways, but mostly I think that Georgie is the kind of girl that a lot of young girls want to be, bold and outspoken and brutally honest, almost to a fault. You know, she has all of these characteristics, and she trusts her instinct and she goes with it, and she doesn't let anyone sway her. So I feel like that also is very, very relatable. The themes of courage, self-preservation, and instinct, also with love of a sibling, are also themes that young readers can strongly relate to. Historical fiction, so we have graphic novel and historical fiction. Both of these genres are genres that are not necessarily very popular, and they don't always fly off the shelves when it comes time to check out books in the library. The third book I chose also because of its genre and also how wonderfully well it was written. I chose The Crossover by Kwame Alexander, and I do see that he just had another book released like just a couple of weeks ago called Booked. This book first drew me in because it is poetry, and I absolutely love poetry, and I love the concept of writing an entire novel based solely on verse. So instead of having traditional chapters and paragraphs and sentences, you have stanzas and lines and poems. This book did not disappoint at all. It is, of course, a Newbery winner, and it also was a recipient of the Coretta Scott King Award, which is absolutely fantastic. So this book can draw in a wide range of readers. I think that's very, very important. Of course, having an African-American protagonist is important, but I also feel like having a male main character will help draw male young readers in. I know from my experience teaching 5th and 6th grade that the boys began to take less of an interest in reading than the girls during those, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade years, even 8th grade years. But the subject matter in this being that it's about basketball, sports, being that it is a male main character, is very enticing and alluring to young readers. On top of that, it appears on the outside to be very, very, very simple. But again, just like with El Depo, it's really not as simple as one might think. These poems are full of figurative language and poetic techniques and style. This particular one right here uses that concrete style to really draw out meaning. We have words like crossing and flossing, moving and grooving, rocking, bumping, locking, thumping. You've got the great onomatopoeia, slipping. There's the visual there. All of these things help aid students or readers in understanding the text and understanding the message of the text. There are different styles throughout the entire book. I love the repetition and the style. Here we have everything italicized in one line when the next line is not. So we can really differentiate between the main character, Josh Bell's thoughts, and what he has to say about that. So there's some contrast there. So in this book, Josh Bell is a 7th grade boy who loves basketball. His dad was a basketball star. His mom is an administrator at his school. So that puts on a different level of pressure for him than for some of his peers. On top of that, Josh has a twin brother, JB. And as many twins, they are very, very close for a long time. But now that they have hit middle school, there's a lot of competition between them on the court. They're vying for their father's, attention as well. And then JB gets a girlfriend, and just like many of our young readers start to face or deal with, when a sibling or a best friend suddenly has a romantic interest of some kind, the relationship can fall apart, and that's what happens with Josh and JB. The relationship, which should be extremely strong, starts to fade and to fall apart, and Josh is desperate to get it back where it needs to be, but it actually ends up escalating and, affecting their game on the court. In the meantime, their dad, who's only 38 in the book, becomes very ill. He suffers a heart attack and then yet another heart attack. And then something, of course, just dealing with the illness alone is difficult. But then when Josh and JB's father passes away at such a young age, leaving them fatherless, they have to realize that they have each other left, and that's what matters more, is that they still have each other even though they don't have their father. They have basketball on each other. So between the way that this is written, the main character himself, and the themes, sibling rivalry, acceptance, individuality, and identity, dealing with the loss of a loved one. These are all things that any reader, including female readers, can really understand. And I do have a lot of female students that do enjoy this book because they love poetry. But I really notice that my male students absolutely love it, and they have looked forward to reading more Kwame Alexander books because of that. And on top of that, they have come to love poetry, something that traditionally, or stereotypically, I should say, is seen as being a girly thing or being kind of feminine. The idea of writing poems is kind of a feminine thing. And then here in this book, it takes it in a very different direction, and it shows young readers and writers that poetry is not just a girly thing, and it's not just a romantic thing. It's not something that's supposed to be only about expressing emotions such as love or anger, but so much more. It can tell the story of one's life, and I think that's very, very important. So those are the 3 books that I've chosen. Why I really wanted to focus on having different genres, and genres that aren't always represented in the realm of literary awards, and also not always represented in our students' backpacks when it comes time to check out books. They gravitate towards the ghost stories or the dystopian. Dystopian is extremely huge right now. I can only see it getting bigger, but here we have poetry, and we have historical fiction, and we have a graphic novel, and those are all things that readers can actually love and relate to and understand. And without a doubt, they fit the criteria that was set out by the American Library Association in determining what literature is distinguished and whether or not these books deserved a Newbery medal, which clearly they did. So I hope that my presentation was helpful to you and really explained why I selected the books that I did. If you have not read these books, I highly, highly recommend them. They're books that you're not going to want to put down until you get to the very, very end. And of course, crossover is actually not that hard to read or lengthy. El Defo was one I had to just sit and read and read, and I couldn't put it down. It was wonderful and great. And at the end, I just felt so, warm all over. Um, I think there's something else too. There's some symbolism in this book. I have to point this out. I believe, and this has not been substantiated, but I believe that the use of a bunny as the main character for CC Bell was very strategic. Bunnies are seen as being childlike and sweet and tender and kind and loving. And that was everything that young CC was. And here she enters this, harsh reality of having a disability. So I definitely believe that was strategic on the part of author CC Bell. And then, of course, crossover being poetry, fantastic, easy read. One Came Home was a book that I probably read in just a couple of days because I could not put it down. It's constant plot twists, turns. It's a mystery with this wonderful, very rich character. It's fantastic. Everyone needs to read all three of those books. Thank you.